Okay, so I think all the buttons are pushed. Okay. Dit gaan annoying wees. Where is the sound coming from? Oh, the speakers. Yeah.
The delay was gone. I don't know what else is going on.
Just push buttons, it's fine. I'll try and speak loudly. Okay, it's not echoing. Phew. This is all way too formal for me. I'm more of an informal person. Afrikaans, English? Who's English? English, okay. Okay, so where are we? We are here today to introduce you to Azure DevOps. My name is Neil. Maya knows me from some work I've done for previous companies, so asked me to come around today. I focus on Azure DevOps. I'm a DevOps practitioner, or my wife likes to call me a DevOps solution architect, because that's got all the buzzwords and people might employ me more often. But so I focus on DevOps practices, solutions, missing screens, okay? And my tool set of choice is Azure DevOps. I'm probably going to say DevOps way more than I'm comfortable with today. So it used to be TFS, VSTS, TFS preview, VS online, etc., etc. But primarily, this is the tool set that I'm going to try and introduce you today. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers me. So the intent behind this is to be very informal, to have a chat, to have a discussion. This is more about you guys than me. There's die speakers. Ek dink dit is af. Okay. Okay, we're good to go again. Okay, so hi, my no. Okay, so let's keep this informal, interactive. Let's have a discussion. It's all about a discussion. I'm going to introduce you to the concepts of Azure DevOps. I'm going to show you what the product is capable of. The intent from my side is to take you through what is available to you from the product point of view. Hopefully there's going to be quite a bit of discussion as to sort of how you foresee using it, how you foresee using it in your environment. And yeah, we'll take it from there. So like I said, these timings, I don't know if you've actually seen the agenda. The timings are very subjective. So either we finish early and everyone can go home for an early day, or we'll have a good chat today. So that is me. Now, yeah. So what are you guys looking for from today? What are you interested in seeing? What are you expecting? What are you hoping for? Sort of from an introduction point of view. And what are the problems you're facing? Mm. Okay. So just an introduction to Azure DevOps.
practice, and I think that there's a lot that could be used the guys knew about.
Okay.
I would like to see a lot more structure. The subgrooming has become a bit of a golf ship in which everything is being thrown in every possible way. I'd be interested in best practice, how to structure projects, large projects, smaller projects. You don't just have one product that you give out. It's a lot of them, and waves of sort of spontaneous chaos. When do you use one block? When do you use two? When do you use three blocks?
Yeah.
Etc.
So, you know, version control.
So when they will discuss which branching and strategy fits which project better. So to add to that, for here, like I said, multiple projects of different sizes and different branches and stages. So we might have a small web developer with a single page, or we might have a big project where multiple guys are doing different components of new C# versus for instance, or combination of web and desktop and server-side stuff. So how if you want to manage such a project, especially when you have a team of multiple people. And
Okay.
different types of projects in one. Like we say now, there's a Python, there's C#, there's web, all of it mixed into one.
Okay.
And then the big thing that I think about is the benefit out of they just see a bit of backlog management. So
So,
it's
yeah.
possible how to properly do it. What's the benefit of going through the effort of writing user stories, creating cards, keeping it updated, etc.
What processes do you use here? Scrum, Agile, Chaos, Waterfall? Eh? Not much. Okay. Anything from this side of the... So you're using Subversion. What other things of work management was? Excel, spreadsheets, email, right tracker. Okay.
Projects are being in a much higher level. A lot of the biggest projects we do are sort of very old school waterfall type approach. You just go through the standard steps.
Okay.
We will use a
I know you'll have to delete everything, just start from scratch. There's actually no. From a Git point of view, it's easier. You can export the SVN repository to a Git repository and then upload that, and you should get most of your history in a fairly consistent state. If you're moving to something like TFVC, then the best and the easiest is to take a snapshot of your current state and put it into your repository.
Yeah, but I would not want to replace the SVN Java script with a Git Java script. Build this part new.
Okay. I grew up with SVN. I don't have a problem with SVN. It is stagnated, though. The same as TFVC, they're stagnating. The functionality level, TFVC actually surpassed SVN about 7 years ago. But yeah, it's miles better than source safe, I can tell you that much. Okay. Okay, let's carry on. Everyone signed in that is here and took a book and a pen? Yes? Okay. Kan ons maar aangaan. Okay. The first thing I'm going to tell you is make a note of that URL. Back in the day when we were still working on older versions of TFS, I used to have a whole bunch of hands-on labs in the back of that pen, which is a USB. But seeing as how that's outdated now, and all those labs are online, a lot of the stuff we'll be covering today will sort of, the labs that are available here touches on a lot of the stuff that we'll cover. So after the fact, if you want to go and play around, you can go and do these labs online. You can use the TechNet VM, so you don't even have to have a local environment. You can go and create an Azure DevOps account and play around in there. It's actually quite nice, full-featured, well maintained. So by all means, have a look at that. Okay, so today, what we are going to try and cover today is we are going to do a brief overview of DevOps and why, how, where it fits in. Then we'll start looking at Azure boards, basically your backlog management, work management, that kind of thing. We'll touch on test planning. Any testers, manual testers? Yeah, no. Who are we? Development? Developers? Is it PMs? Stakeholders, product owners, no, nothing like it. Okay. Proliferate through. Okay. Then we'll go over to source code management, and I'll probably focus here on Git. So I generally have the two options, TFS or Azure DevOps. I'll use those terms interchangeably today. Has two version control systems. TFVC, which is very similar to SVN, and then obviously Git. It is built into Azure DevOps, so it's not a separate product, it's not a separate thing, it doesn't live on a file system somewhere else, it's built into a product, single database, that kind of thing. And I'll cover some branching and merging strategies and that kind of stuff, some of the basic functions of Git, with regards to that as well. Then this afternoon will primarily be focused on the CI/CD type of thing, your builds, release, or pipelines, and then some administrative stuff. So I'll cover some licensing, how this product is actually licensed, extending it, service hooks, that kind of stuff, and then QA and wrap up very late this afternoon. Okay, so first of all, DevOps. DevOps is one of these terms that is currently fairly overrated. Like ALM, thing just beeped at me. ALM a few years ago was the big thing. DevOps currently, I'm sure in 2 or 3 years' time there's going to be another term that we all should be chasing. DevOps basically gets broken down into 3 aspects. It's the union of people, process, and product. Donovan Brown from Microsoft coined this phrase where it's the union of people, process, products to enable continuous delivery of value to your end users. Now, the big thing to know about DevOps is that it is people, process, and product. Today we're going to cover a lot of the product. Hopefully we're going to discuss a bit of the process, but these 3 need to get taken, and it's a mindset change, it's a cultural change, it's a change in the way that you're approaching stuff, it's a different view on what you are doing from a day-to-day point of view. And then obviously that is underpinned by a product or a tool suite that can fit into the areas. I've been into quite a few companies before where they expect something like Azure DevOps to be a silver bullet. Okay, it's not. You sort of need to get a synergy between your process, the people using it, and the product. You're not going to all of a sudden use a product and everything is fine. Okay, it's how you use it, it's what you do with it, it's the way that you approach your problems and delivery. So yeah, there's a couple of studies being done on DevOps, and they basically came to the conclusion that high-performing DevOps companies are deploy 46 times more frequent than non-high-performing DevOps companies. 2,500 times faster lead time from changes, from the lead time for changes, which means from the idea to having value in the customer's hands, they generally deliver 2,500 times quicker than normal waterfall approached companies. The time to recover, this is probably a more apt statistic. It's 2,600 times faster mean time to recover. And what this means is you can deploy very rapidly. And Brian Harry once said, with something like the new pipelines that was built back then, is this now gives you the ability to deploy bugs into production very quickly, right? The thing is about, firstly, all the bits and pieces that you need to fit into your pipeline to negate that. And then once you do find this issue in production, how quickly can you fix it? Because we know how fickle clients and customers are that use it. It's very quickly for them to see a bug and not use a product again. I know I've uninstalled quite a few products in my life because of it. Azure DevOps, they actually deploy up to 4 times a day. Hot fixes and bug fixes if required. They have the ability to deploy up to 4 times a day to this product. Anyway, so that notwithstanding, obviously you've got a 7 times lower change failure rate. So there's less chance of actually introducing problems. And all this basically means faster time to market, and that means the value is in the end user's hands quicker, meaning increased revenues. You guys develop products, right? Okay. Projects. Okay. Can you elaborate on that? Okay.
Try and implement the off-the-shelf product, but it hardly ever goes like that. Clients always want this and that, and this added and that. So it's all these add-ons and additions and stuff, which sometimes are huge projects, but within our standard resources.
Okay.
So that's why I said more project than product.
Okay.
And it's, if I understand it correctly, it's a very seldom that after the work has been done, it continues. The project code, deliver, and then that's it. Okay, I take it back.
He's the new guy. Okay. And obviously, if you introduce issues and bugs and stuff, they come back and let you know about it very quickly, right?
And normally I support for a standard project that is 3 months for default indicators on any bugs that they can report to the user fix. And then they often also buy additional support and then install to do continuous bug fixing. So we do have projects where it's done and dusted, and if there's no support, then we don't support it any further. But
Okay.
often we do have clients that need support, so we will fix bugs as they report them.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is basically the guys go away and 3-4 years later they're back. As well. So it's you actually need quite a long history and you need to keep that, and it is almost expected that we can just pick up from where we left off 3 years ago. It's quite challenging actually. Yeah, because most of our big clients are state to state, and time is very slow.
Mm-hmm.
When they want the product, they want it yesterday.
Yeah.
Once the ball is and then time seems to pass.
That's the default. I want it yesterday. Then you ask them a question. 2 months later, they'll get back to you. No, we wanted it last week. Yeah. Been there, done that. Okay. So, Azure DevOps Server and Azure DevOps Services. So, the two SKUs, you've got Azure DevOps Services, which is the online hosted version that Microsoft hosts. And then you've got Azure DevOps Server, which is the on-premises version of it. The difference between them primarily is that services is about 4 to 6 months ahead of server. I'm actually going to run through the majority of the stuff on a local VM because it's quicker and I don't generally have problems with connectivity. But it looks and feels the same, especially now. A lot of the functionality is there, but like I said, services is ahead of the curve. Microsoft deploys every 3 weeks to services, and then that gets rolled up to, now they're going to probably do it about twice a year. They're going to roll up all the new features onto an on-premises update. So it gets broken up into verticals that they call it. So we're going to step through each one of these in its own time, but we've got boards, pipelines, repos, plans, and then artifacts, which is sort of hanging there off the side. And yeah, we're going to take a tour through all of these. What's the time now? 12:30.
I know it's a very difficult question to answer, but if you had to make a call now, would you go server or services?
So let me explain to you. The reason you would go for server is purely based on your culture, your company. So I do work for a couple of banks and a couple of large financial places that they've got a mandate of their data and IP is not allowed outside of their data centers and all that kind of stuff. So then, yeah, go for server. Obviously, it increases cost because now you've got it running on your environments. You've got licensing and stuff for the operating systems that you need to take care of, and then certain things that you sort of take for granted, having access outside of the company lands and that kind of stuff comes at huge prices, and some just don't allow it. If that is the way that you think, then go for server, but more often than not I'll recommend going services. And yeah, from a security point of view, I know we've got data centers now in South Africa on Azure, but Azure DevOps will probably not come down to here. So our local closest one is in Europe, and the UK is generally one that you'd use from a policy point of view, from data protection and whatnot. That said, Brian Harris said that if there's enough demand for it locally, they might incorporate or open it or host it here as well, which is sort of a catch-22 situation, but anyway. Yeah, and obviously the costs that you pay for it, it's pretty much the same now. They're changing the licensing model for both server and services to be aligned. As of next month, I think they're going to start implementing the user licensing on premises, and then all the hosting and that kind of stuff is not your concern. Yes, from a security point of view, I spoke earlier saying, well, from a, Microsoft is almost entirely running on Azure DevOps services. So from a security point of view, I'm pretty sure that they'll make sure that their stuff is not hackable or obtainable outside of the security policy. So I think we're pretty good off for from a security point of view. I think they'll make pretty sure that their stuff is secure. So it's all running on the same services. So the short answer is, I think yes, because yes, you have it AAD backed, and AAD should be 2FA. The other bits, yes. Git is, I presume so. You'll use your corporate logins if you're AAD backed, so it should be fine. It should be double factor. Repeat the question. Oh, this is very much like presentations and demos and stuff. Okay. So, yes, 2FA is available. It's the Azure DevOps is AAD backed, Azure Active Directory backed. So, if it depends on your AAD policies, and Git should be, because you use your Windows and integrated authentication credentials managers, so it should be fine. Okay. Azure boards, so work management. This is probably going to be our first section. An hour and a half, okay. So you guys are pretty. Let's go. Yeah. Okay, brief overview of Azure DevOps. So as I mentioned earlier, this is Azure DevOps services, but the primary layout, the functionality, the SKUs, the verticals, they're all pretty much the same. So if you can use it here, you can use it on services and vice versa. It's not too much of a concern. The bits and pieces that might look different, for example, where they do a lot of work is in your pipelines, a summary page that might look a bit different because they've recently added a whole bunch of analytics to it. Yeah, overview, we've got summary dashboards, analytics views. So this is sort of the view of what is in the system. I actually want to take a step back from this. So TFS used to be you've got the server, you've got the collection, and then you've got teams, team projects, and then you've got teams. So now they talk about organizations. So if I go over to my landing page, you'll notice that I've got what they call 3 collections in Azure services. It's called organizations. This is almost like a physical unit, a physical boundary between these. This actually in the background maps to a single database in SQL. Okay, there are physical boundaries between this. I can't access stuff out of one organization or collection from another organization or a collection. Under this, we've got what is called a team project. And the size and the scoping of the team project is usually quite a big discussion point. But it is a bucket of stuff. Okay, the team project is a logical grouping, and in there you've got your version control, you've got your work management, you've got your pipelines, all that kind of stuff. We can break that down to another level called teams. The team basically forms a view on specifically the work management stuff inside this bucket. Okay, so we can actually take the work management, the backlogs, and we can segregate it down into smaller logical contextual units called a team. The team approach is getting fairly fuzzy at this point in time, and Microsoft is still considering what they're going to do with it going forward, if it's going to become first-class citizen or how they're going to segregate it. But like I said, it is a view from a contextual viewpoint on your backlog. And I'll show you exactly the details around that later. Okay, so we've got our team project there. You can see my mouse is doing its own thing. So you can see basically the services inside the team projects. If just out of interest sake, this is kind of the landing page for you when you go in here. So you'll see my work items across all the teams or the team projects in this. So I can see what I'm busy with, what I'm doing, pull requests. Let's see if they've got, not yet. Okay. If I go into the team project, there we've got the contextual bounds from the team project. So we've got a summary page. This is just bits and pieces. The dashboard, this is our view into this team project. So this will show us what is actually happening. These are all widgets. They are customizable. We can go and add okay, I get it now. There's a delay on that versus this. So when I do this, I'm over here and then this thing starts moving. Okay, so I'll try and focus on here. Okay, so the dashboards, we have the ability to set these up. They consist of what we call widgets, and widgets can be some of anything within your team project. So assign build history, burn up, burn down, charts for tests, build, I showed you build, deployment statuses, lead time, markdown, pull requests, queries, all that kind of stuff. So you can build up what you want to see. We can extend this by going to extension gallery, and I will talk about that quite a bit later. But the gallery has a whole bunch of other widgets that Microsoft third-party people wrote, and you can take those and incorporate them into your collection or your organization, and then you can go and customize this to show you what you want to do. So that's the basics for a dashboard. We can have more than one dashboard, so we can actually add additional dashboards, and we can also contextualize them to a team. So you'll see there I've got a default team sitting there. If I go and say, do I have any other teams? Yes. There we go. If I go to another team, you'll see they may or may not have a dashboard, but then we can go and customize them and go and add this dashboard. So like I said, we can have a default dashboard for the team. We can have more than one dashboard for the team. So if you are an ops guy, your view of what is happening in the team might be different towards your dev guys or the testers, whatever the case may be. So we can actually have those catered towards what you're looking for. We can also expand this and refresh it, so we can put it onto screens and that kind of stuff. And I say that because that's a fairly recent addition that's been asked for many years. So it's fairly exciting, but maybe not to you guys. So dashboards. A fairly new addition to this is your analytics. And this is actually using an analytics framework in the background that gives you access to data, the work item management. Primarily, they're adding test case, builds I think is still coming, those kind of things. And for many years, the reporting, I'll cover reporting a bit later, but reporting relied on a warehouse. So actually SQL Server warehouse with cubes sitting on top of those. The problem was that those were specific for on-premise, because in hosted services, I can't even talk too much about that. They didn't have, they didn't give you access to those cubes, and they also didn't give you access to reporting services where the reports were running for this. So for a few years, there was no real nice reporting functionality unless you go and pull all the work items down and do your own thing, but you didn't have history. So they've actually recently also added this idea of analytics views, and analytics views gives you access to the data, but also from a historical point of view. So you can go and see change over a certain amount of time. So you can see what your burn downs and burn ups and those kind of things are. You can see how many work items or bugs you fix over a period of time, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of excitement about this finally, because they're actually doing it, but it's taken way too long. And then do you guys use Power BI? No? But so Power BI works quite well with this, that you can actually go and consume these views and create yourself some Power BI dashboards and that kind of stuff. Wikis, this is just sort of an unstructured way of documentation. Back in the day, there was a link between TFS and SharePoint, which was actually removed, and they built in this product called a wiki. So wiki is just sort of loose, unstructured documents. So if you the Atlassian world, it would be similar to Confluence, those kind of things. Okay, but we are now looking at boards. So boards primarily. Is there any questions? If there's any questions, feel free to ask. So not directly, no. There's actually, You're talking about teams.
Yeah.
So there's a hook between Azure DevOps and teams, so you can actually publish information to teams, but they have their own task management at this point in time. There was talk a while back of actually combining it. That's one of the reasons they went this whole verticals approach, is to be able to take this and make it pluggable so it could be used somewhere else. I've not heard much more about that. But yeah, so you can publish stuff to teams from here. So if a build fails, if a work item gets updated, that kind of stuff. That's pretty much it for the time being. Okay, boards. So this is the work management. So one of the key things about Azure DevOps is this integrated notion. So you get a lot of systems, you get a lot of some of them are good at what they're doing, but they're not necessarily the best at what they're doing. The value add that something like this gives you is this integration between all the aspects. So if you think about I won't say Atlassian too often, but you've got Atlassian, you've got Jira, and you've got Git, and you may have the build system, but they are actually separate products altogether. You license them separately, and then you sort of try and make them work together. There's a couple of things, SVN, bug tracker, there's ways of making them work together, but you need to go and put in work and effort to get them to work together. That kind of stuff comes out of the box here, okay? They are segregated in such a fashion that you can use it all together and it works beautifully, or you can just use what you want from this and it will still work wonderfully. So you can just use the Git repository if you just wanted a Git repository. It's up to you. Obviously, working everything integrated gives you a lot more insight, a lot more depth of information than not. So before we start talking about boards, I'm going to tell you there are this concept of a process template in Azure DevOps services. Out of the box, there's 4 now. So there's CMMI, there's Agile, and there's Scrum, and then there's a basic template. Just because they are named CMMI, Agile, and Scrum doesn't mean that they are going to strictly adhere to or force you to use those methodologies. It is merely a way of Azure DevOps to speak your language. So if you're talking about user stories, you might look at the Agile template. If you're talking about product backlog items, you might use a Scrum. If you're more structured in your process and you're using requirements and you're doing triages and that kind of stuff, CMMI is probably where you want to be. There's nothing stopping you from using CMMI in a strictly Scrum environment and vice versa. Okay. The basic template now that they've introduced a few months ago is a very small watered down version, and it basically has to-do, doing and done statuses on tasks and your backlog items. Getting back to the process template. So the terminology changes between them. We've got this concept of a work item. A work item is just a structure. It has a bunch of metadata on it. So if you look at, for example, let's go and have a look. Here, you'll see we've got a product backlog item, which is the name of this work item type. And if I had to open it, it's got a bunch of fields. Some of them are sort of system fields, so your state, area, and iteration. But these are all customizable. So you can change these fields, you can add these to them depending on what information is relevant to you, what is the information you are trying to capture with this. Okay, we basically work off of 2 structures. So if I go and have a look at this guy here, so this template has epics, features, and backlogs. So it's basically a hierarchical structure. So backlog items roll up into features, roll up into epics. Some of the older templates only have backlog items and features. You can go and add up to 5 or 6 levels of your own, depending on the level that you're trying to manage this. This then breaks down further. So these items, your backlogs, features, epics, user stories, requirements, they state a need. This is the requirement. This is what is wanted by business. This is what is needed by business in one form or the other. We then take these items and break them down into tasks. And actually, I think I break it down here. So, as I mentioned, epics, features, user stories, PBIs, and requirements, this states a need. This thing gets broken down into tasks. And task is a doing thing. This is an action that is performed to fulfill the need. How we measure these things differs. So, user stories, we generally, user stories, product backlog items, we estimate in effort or complexity a number that is not relatable to time, and then task in this case gets broken down into hours. And I'll probably go into a bit more detail beyond that. So yes. I was talking about terminology. The naming, for example, here is once again depicted by the process template. So the backlog items might be user stories in your Agile template and requirements in your CMMI. But the basics, the primary function of it is the same. Okay. Yes. Is there any questions? No. Okay. The backlog management here. So this is the product backlog. If you're going to look at sort of the terminology and everything is very much geared towards an Agile approach, because that's the people building this product is heavily invested in Agile approaches, and that's pretty much a predominant process or methodology in industry, in the market at the moment. So we talk about the backlog. So this is a product backlog. This is generally speaking how I recommend people break down the size of your team project. Okay. So when we talk about breaking this down, you know, what size is your team project? There's a lot of people that say that is going with this notion of one team project rules them all. So you've got one team project and then you break those down into teams depending on what you're doing, how you're doing. The work item, the backlog, this is as high as you want to manage the work that is being done by the development team as a whole. So if you want to manage everyone on one backlog, you want to see exactly where everyone is working and that's what they're working on, what they are involved with, that is the scope of your backlog. If you've got two different teams and they aren't related and they're getting managed by different people, then there's an argument to be made for two team projects because they are separate from each other. But like I said, if you've got one team of people and there's a whole bunch of work that this team needs to do, and this team consists of sort of different focus areas, but you still want to manage the work on one area, then that is the scope of your team project. Does that make sense? Kind of, barely. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, backlog. This is your product backlog. These are all the items that still need to be performed in your product. Okay. We can see at different levels. So if I go to features, you should be able to see there's all the features. If I expand them, you should see this bugs breakdown. It's not very nice. Let's do this. If I say that this is part of that, this is part of that, this is part of that. If I go and have a look at my items, you should see now I've got a feature, and that feature gets broken down into these product backlog items. If I go one up, let's see if there's any items. You should see even at the higher level what it looks like, and I can go and delve down into what the structure is of this. The way that I usually tell people to do this is the different levels of focus. So if you're working on your backlog items here, this is generally speaking your product, your PMs, your product owners, Scrum Masters, whomever, the people that are defining the requirements, the needs. They are the ones working on this level of your backlog. So higher is your managers, and then it becomes your C-level. They just want to see that this product, there's something going on there. So they'll be focused on this to see, is this feature or product program or whatever you want to call it, is there movement happening here? And then of course one higher is a higher level if however you want to manage it. But the higher this goes, the more broad your view becomes. Okay?
So typically your project managers are going to be working on things like Microsoft projects.
Mm-hmm.
Would there be a way to bring the work program structure into this system?
So yes, there is. I can show you now actually. I don't think I've got MS Project. No. That's fine. So there's this thing, you guys have Visual Studio installed, so you've got Team Explorer installed already. For people that are not developers, you can actually go and download the Office integration tools, which is basically the old Team Explorer. That gives you plugins to Excel and to MS Project. And that then gives you the ability to, if I go and see the team there, we'll probably cover this again, but if I say new list, let's see. So what I've done, I'll probably cover it. Yeah, let's see. So there's a team plugin in Excel and in MS Project. So similar approaches. I've connected to the server, to Azure DevOps server or services, doesn't really matter, to a query, and I'll show you queries and stuff a bit later. But these are now the items sitting on in that query, returned by that query, okay, in Excel. And the same approach for MS Project. So now I can go and I can make changes to these and take these changes, spelling, and push them back into the server. So 80. So there you can see that I've actually updated the work item. You can add more stuff. This is generally speaking the one way that we do bulk imports from other systems. You can just copy and paste it. The nice thing about MS Project is your successors and predecessors, it actually gets mapped to the work items, so you can actually have the Gantt chart in MS Project and it reflects back into TFS or Azure DevOps as well.
Is there a special structure for MS Project if you want to start with that and then build
In terms of what? So no, you would then connect your current workbook to an Azure DevOps service and then just publish it up. That will, there's field mappings, obviously, some of them. So you'll see if I go and start add a new item, there's required, so it needs to know what kind of work item it is. It needs to know what the state is and that kind of stuff. So there's a few required fields, but once you've set those, you can publish back and forth. You can do that, yeah. That's part of your mapping, but yes, you can do that. The difference here is that you can only have one person assigned at this stage to a work item, and in MS Project, obviously, you can have multiple people assigned to it, but yeah. Okay, and then also, so before the analytics views came into play, we used this for some of your pivoting, slicing, dicing, and that kind of stuff. Obviously, this is just your view of the work. So it's your current view, no history, that kind of thing. Okay, where was I? Backlogs. Okay, so your backlog management, we can view these as a board. This is your Kanban board. So the basics at this level is work in, work out type of approach. So very much you can see there, doing, done, that's a feature that you've got. So you can actually, that's very much your Kanban approach. You're doing versus done, waiting for the next column to clear up. There's a couple of things. This is of course very touch friendly, so you can do all that kind of stuff. So if you want justification to get a touch screen. These columns, so your backlog, your Kanban board can get, you've got more control over what it looks like at this point in time. They're busy working on it, but at this point in time. So we can decide what fields we want to show on those cards. And if we go to columns here, you can see we've got a bunch of columns, and I can go and add, let's do that and say, we can map it to a specific state on the work item. So if you've got bugs and multiple types of work items here, you'd have, you'll see different states you can map to it. If you have the column and it's, let's get this. State not even on here, let's put state on there. So if you see here, for example, if I've got, this is work in new work, so the state is new, and as soon as I move it over to one of these guys, you'll see that the state would change appropriately. And if it's not assigned, it would actually get assigned to you, but I can assign it to someone else. And so forth and so forth. Okay, so Kanban board, we've got columns, we've got swim lanes, so you can actually have different verticals across it, so you can manage it like that. You can actually query it. You can actually set work days if that is what you do. Add that, right? Okay, this works on all those levels of the requirements. So we can have this sitting on backlog items, on features, on epics. So you've got one view and you can see how these things are moving across. You can put this onto a big monitor and these things will update also based on your settings. So it will actually keep you updated to see how things are moving across. Okay. Any questions around that? 3 actually, but yeah. Yeah.
Is it working with them as a task or as a requirement or as a task?
Or none, but yes.
They're not a both.
No.
Okay.
No. So this is dependent on how you, let's see if I'm right. Yeah, there's 3. See? Or not managed on your backlogs there. This is dependent on how you see bugs. The general consensus in modern day practices is if a bug is small enough, fix it. Get it done. If it is something that is bigger than what you can do right here, right now, then you'll go and create it on a backlog or on your storyboard or somewhere where you can track it. Now, this is where this comes into play. So it becomes a bit of a contentious issue. I've been to a lot of people that use the bug as a task, which is not really right because you are now performing an action against a bug. What is a bug? It is actually a definition of something. So I'm more inclined to say it needs to be on your backlog, it needs to be managed on your backlog as a requirement, and you actually break down the bug into tasks because that's how you manage it. So this is one of those things that I must try and not stand on my soapbox too often, but I've seen a lot of people take TFS, Azure DevOps, and customize it till it's unrecognizable. And one of the things I've seen a lot of people do is they try and map the entire process on, for example, your user stories or your product backlog items. So they would have design, develop, test, error, redo, rework, that kind of stuff managed as your statuses on this, which to me is wrong, because now you've got it's actually been on this and on task. Those are the 2 areas. But if I take a task, is there whiteboards? No. So if I've got a task and I said this task would take me 2 hours to do, okay? I've done it. Now it goes into test. Okay, fair enough. So someone's testing it. Happiness. So now there's a bug. So now what they do is they take the task and say, no, put it back into develop. Okay? So now there's work that needs to be done here. Okay, fair enough. What do you do now? Do you update the amount of hours on this task? Do you manage how many times it gets back here? There's no real way of showing that. So now this task goes into the cycle of some work, bug, rework,